Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and today I'm speaking with documentary filmmaker Seth Dahl. And to everyone at home, thank you for listening. Please take a second to help me grow the show so that I can keep delivering these conversations week after week for years to come. Subscribe, rate, and review the show in whatever podcasting app you're using right now, and check out the show notes to follow me on social media and YouTube as well. When you share your favorite episodes, tag me and use the hashtag GoingInBlind. You can also join my mailing list at zachtidwell.net. And if you know someone you think I should talk to, have them send me an email at contact.goinginblind@gmail.com. Mr. Seth Dahl, thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Zach.
It sounds like from the little bit that we've spoken offline, it seems like both of our schedules are absolute chaos right now. So I'm glad we found a magic window here so I can pick your brain for a little bit, because I'm really... I've been creative my whole life and have had creative interests and have still found ways to be creative even after losing my sight. That's something that software development has become for me, and writing. But I do not have the mind or even an understanding of how, when you're making films, and planning that out ahead of time. I would imagine you're playing all of this stuff in your mind, but I do, just for other people's context at home, this is Seth Dahl, and he is an award-winning filmmaker now, running his own company called Big Cedar Media, and has been doing that for about 2 years now, I believe, full time. And we're here so I can pick his brain on the whole process. But what for you, again, I just listened to the Long River Home yesterday to make sure, because I'd heard it before, but I wanted to make sure it was fresh in my mind coming into this. When you set out to make some long film like that and you're capturing somebody's story, how does that even start? I mean, with that, everyone heard of Lonnie Bedwell from the first episode. That when I had Joe Mornini on, it was perfect, because at the very end of that episode, Joe got a text, and Nancy Mornini, Joe's wife, came into the room to show him a text that said Lonnie had made it to the South Pole, and he's finished this trek. And so it's funny because everyone's now been bugging me like, you need to have that Lonnie guy on. I'm trying to get it lined up. But for you, I think you probably played a big part in helping Lonnie's story get out there. So how does that all start?
Well, yeah, I guess you mean the creative process of making the film, or how did I get tied in with Lonnie?
Well, I mean, your background in journalism started that's you got into filmmaking from journalism initially, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I did study at the University of Montana. I studied some journalism. I ended up graduating there with a journalism degree. And at the time, I remember our professors really having foresight and seeing that the journalism field is changing. I had no intentions of really, I guess I wanted to be a photojournalist that, could head back over into conflict zones and take photos, or go into disasters and take photos. And I think I was caught up in that romance of that kind of profession, right? So I did study journalism after taking a documentary class in Bozeman at the Montana State University. And then I transferred to the University of Montana and got a journalism degree. But the professors at the time had the foresight to change, to allow us into all different areas of journalism. Instead of just going through print journalism or photojournalism, you could now take classes in every one of those areas. And it just was because the journalism was changing, right, when I was going to school. And so I was able to take documentary classes. I was able to take video editing classes. I was able to take photojournalism and print classes, and even type TV, radio TV type classes. So anyway, just had, that's important to say because I was able to do all these different forms of storytelling, but really, journalism school never prepared me for business or the business of filmmaking, right?
I feel like you hear that pretty often about college. Like, yeah, I got the degree, but I wasn't prepared for the real world.
Well, I realized in school that I wasn't going to go overseas. I wasn't going to make that jump back over into the conflict zones, or I just didn't want to leave the mountains and rivers of Montana. But it's important to say that I did find a video production class, a video editing class in journalism school. And from there, once I started making these video stories, I was like, that's it. That's for me. So it sort of pivoted. It initially started with wanting to take photojournalism, which I still love, just the still photography of real moments, and trying to capture that decisive moment is really just a joy. But it's more moved into storytelling with a bunch of moving pictures, right? And video production is really where my heart's at right now, just with telling these in-depth stories with video production. So
Yeah.
that sort of brings you, up to speed with how I was educated. But like I said, I never had uh, I wasn't prepared for the business end of filmmaking, and so I started my little production company right out of college, just to start working on some of my own projects myself. So I actually had Big Cedar Media for more than 13 years now, but it's only been full time for like full time, meaning my only source of income for 2 years.
Yeah. And
I've had other jobs in the past as a river guide, which we've talked about a little bit, but
yeah.
that's been, I'd share video production with the river guiding. And now for 2 years, I guess you could say I've retired from the river guiding, and now it's just into visual storytelling.
Yeah. And so two things I want to touch on here. I want to come back to, first of all, congratulations on progressing to the point where you could do that full time. I think, especially with starting your own business, dude, that takes huge balls
Yeah.
because
Yeah, it does.
you have a family and kids too, right?
I do. Yes. Yeah. We
Yeah.
have a
So that's a
2-month
bigger,
old.
that's an even bigger ballsy move like that. I always respect that. And when people say that they've taken that step, but I
Yeah.
want to, you mentioned going back to the conflict zones. What did you do when you were in the military?
So I was in the Army National Guard, one of the 163rd Infantry out of Missoula, Montana. So I served in a Guard unit for 7 years in an infantry unit, and then deployed to Iraq in 2004 to 2005. Uh, um, and yeah, that was my job over there. It's just day-to-day operations in Iraq at that time. It was fairly early on in the war. But I think the initial forces had been defeated at that point, but we were up against, guerrilla warfare and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
But
what lasted the remaining, 17 years of the war after
when,
that? Yeah.
yeah, it was a long drawn out process. But to get to the point is there was a photojournalist there that was taking photos of some of our missions. And I saw him working and taking photos of us as we were clearing buildings. And, we ended up, some sharpshooters took some shots at us, and we ended up going and clearing half of this town looking for these people that had shot at us, these insurgents. And the photojournalist took the photos of my platoon, and those ran all over the world for the Associated Press. And my mother in Great Falls, Montana, on the front page of the Tribune, saw me in the back of a Humvee with some detainees we wrapped up that day. And the photo was from my nose down as I was sitting in the back of the cargo Humvee with these detainees.
But she
And
recognized you
she's
from
like,
your
that's my
mouth.
son. Yeah. Well,
Wow.
from bits and pieces of a busted up nose. No, I guess I don't have that bad of a nose, but it's, we could say we just knew me from my nose.
Okay.
In the chin area, of course, but that's our joke. And
Yeah.
I don't have a deformed nose, just so you know, but it's
You can
just,
tell me that all you want, but now it's in my head. I'm like, this dude's nose is whack.
no, I think I wrestled way back in high school, and so I have no, I'm not going to, let's not talk about this anyway, but she recognized me from that. And it ran
Yeah.
over the road all over the world. And I was amazed by that process and watching him work. And I asked him for the photos. I think he gave them to me. many years ago, and I had those and just decided to come back and study photojournalism. So that sort of got me wrapped up in that.
That's where that was that ever an idea in your mind before that, or it was that whole experience?
No, I just love photography. No, it was not at all. I don't remember it being like something I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But after seeing that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just pour into this and see if I can do that.
That's such a neat origin story behind all that.
Yeah, it is pretty neat. I ended up coming back and studying at Montana State University, like I said, uh, just studying photography. And then ended up taking a documentary class they had. And that was an in-depth documentary photography class that after that, I was like, you know what? I need to study photojournalism at University of Montana.
Yeah, so as you finish school and you're dabbling in it, it sounds like, were you just doing side gigs while you were river guiding and just kind of doing it for fun?
I was, uh, I was working, let's see here. So while I was going to school, I went to, well, I worked out in the Middle Fork of the Salmon for a lot of years. So out there, I was a fish guide as well as I drive sweet boat and all that stuff out there. So that just became a lifestyle. And I just didn't want to give that up. I was a kayaker, and really enjoyed that wilds of the river and the wilderness and just being out there with my friends and this really wild place. And if you know what a sweet boat is, it's this huge boat that carries all the gear down on a 6-day river trip. And driving that thing is a challenge through class 4 rapid, and it's
Yeah.
always something new. You could wreck and you could ruin the trip. So cool, like that level of intensity, and it's like a freight train going down the river that is not on tracks. And if you don't know the river and you're not using the current, you're not going to do well in that. And it's just terrifying. So I think I love the thrill, the challenge, the fear that boat brought to the table. And just we got captivated by the lifestyle out there. And so after I'd come back after the river trips, then I would, after 3-4 months out of the river on the Middle Fork of the Salmon in Idaho, then I would come back and try to build my business or just find a couple projects that started my fire and start working on those.
Yeah. Well, and so I've never, all the kayaking I've done has been, if it's been multi-day, it's been motor supported. So, someone's hiking the gear in a van and just meeting us at spots. But I've
Yep.
done a little rafting, and I don't think I'd ever actually, no, I definitely never done any whitewater until I was blind. And it's the rafting that I have done, it's amazing what river guides can do. And that for people who haven't done it, these guys are reading the water as they literally learn how to read the water and look for the different shapes of the currents and the way the water's flowing, and stand on the back of the raft with an oar and will whip the ass end of the boat around to get it where it needs to be as they're ordering everyone to paddle. It's it's kind of mind blowing when you're on it because I can feel all that and I can feel the raft getting whipped around. But is that how you got connected with Team River Runner?
So let's see here. No, Team River Runner, that's another, I'll try to be quick on that story. I had met them on the Middle Fork of the Salmon. No, I think it was on the main Salmon, actually. I had this company that my company at the time, Adventure Guides, launched with on the same launch date was named Canyons, and Canyons put on a Team River Runner river trip on the main Salmon. Every summer they did 1 week. And as a veteran out there, I was like, I want to be a part of these trips. How do I get on and help guide? And so I ended up just for a couple seasons working that Team River Runner trip on as a guide on working for Canyons on the main Salmon. And so that's how I tied in with them. I had met some people through that whole um, through the whole deal there. Dave Roby was one of the names that comes to mind, and he had David. Well, so when I was in the off season after working a river trip or working a river season, I get this call from Dave saying, "Hey, um, do you want to go down the Grand Canyon with this blind kayaker? I don't want to sleep on the ground for 21 days." I think is what he said. And so
Was this
I
for
was
the first trip that Lonnie
this
went down?
this was for oh my goodness, let's see. I didn't get these straight.
You don't
This
have to know the
was
number if it wasn't just was it or it
Oh no, no,
wasn't.
no. I
Okay.
wasn't on his first trip down the Grand Canyon. I believe this was um his second trip,
Okay.
I want to say. But I had gotten this message from Dave saying, "Hey, do you want to?" He knew I was a river guide, had some free time, in the off season as I was building my business. "Do you want to come on this Grand Canyon and guide this blind kayaker?" And I was like, "Yes, sign me up." So after that rivers trip that season, I remember paddling off the river, which was pretty epic. I ran through. I had my kayak on the river on the raft with me, and we were actually doing a late season trip, and so I ended up on this far upstream camp, leaving the crew, saying goodbye to everybody. That's how I worked it out with the outfitter. And I pushed down in my kayak, and I was kayaking it with all the Milky Way above me, running through these rapids with a headlamp. And then
That
I
is
was able to
insane.
paddle out all these miles. It was awesome. Paddle out, jump in a truck, and then drove to Flagstaff to meet everybody. And that's sort of how I got tied in with that trip with Lonnie Bedwell. And it turned out it was Eric Weinmeyer's trip, right? That he invited Lonnie on to kayak. So it was that they were doing a whole film trip for that um, with Eric Weinmeyer and Weinmeier, and like they did this film trip with all this, uh, some of his connections and filmmakers and everything like that. So that's ended up how I met Lonnie. And in training for that river trip, because I had never really guided blind kayaking, we had go out to like the whitewater park. I remember in the Carolinas, we would go out there and outside. I want to say it was outside of Charlotte, and just practice how to kayak in this whitewater training center and learn how to guide a blind kayaker down the river. And so that sort of built us up for before the Grand Canyon, and we got a good I learned how to guide uh, blind kayaking there, and then we just ended up going in and figuring it out on the river in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. And so where did the idea for the Long River Home come in?
Well, so that trip right there, I met a lot of just amazing people, just movers and shakers in their own right, right? And one of whom was Timmy O'Neill. And Timmy O'Neill is now he is the executive producer for um, the Long River Home. So him and Lonnie got together some years after that trip, and they said, "Hey, we want you as a veteran to tell a veteran story in Grand Canyon." And so I said, "Yeah, of course," as an aspiring filmmaker. I really wanted, to make a film, and that was in many ways a break for me. Like they opened a lot of doors with asking me to do that. Timmy, this film would have never been made if it wasn't for Timmy and even Lonnie getting together and them collaborating to want to tell a story like that. And in that process, we found Russel Davies and we found Aaron Howell.
Okay. Yeah. And for people who don't know Lonnie, it's hard not to be he's a magnetic person. So I would
Very,
imagine after that, when you get a call from him and you're like, absolutely, I would jump on that. He's
oh
a
yeah,
special person.
very special.
So this is some years after you guys decide you're going to go for this. What's the next step? I know obviously you're preparing for the trip and stuff, but in where do you go from there? Outside of training for the kayaking stuff, do you have a team for this? Are you planning out ahead of time? Have you written this? Okay, this is where we're going to get the shots, and this is where we're going to pull these guys aside and have these. It sounds like you're interviewing them, but there's cuts from their answers to your questions in the movie itself, which people can find on YouTube now. That is a recent occurrence, but it looks like it's doing really well on there, which is really exciting. But take us through the actual process of making this because I'm so curious as to how all that works.
Yeah. Well, it's being that it was, my first. I made a lot of videos up until that point, right? But that was my first film with people behind me wanting to this made, and you know, um, so I took it as a big opportunity, a very big opportunity. I didn't skimp. I gave it all, all of myself. But I think with to answer your question, starting at the beginning is just with the planning process. You come up with a treatment. It helps if you know what, the area. Like I know kayaking, and I know veterans. I know river guiding, and I actually before this have shot a handful of different stories on the river. So I understand how challenging it can be and to shoot uh, on water, on a river that's moving and getting exactly the shots that you need.
Well, because you
Uh,
get one chance because you're going down the river. So if you want it at this
yeah,
spot, you have to hit it the first time.
exactly. And
Yeah.
luckily it was a 14-day river trip, Grand Canyon on the Colorado River there. We got a lot of days to work with. In some ways almost too much, because you come away with all this great footage, and how do you slim that down to what the story is? But you go into it with the treatment. So I knew what kind of a story I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell a truthful story about veterans and how, kayaking has given them, uh, this freedom, this brotherhood again to go down the rivers and look out for each other and watch people six and just get down the river as a team and have these really exhilarating experiences in these wild places. It's a lot of myself is in the Long River home because of just those natural feelings and thoughts towards rivers and it yeah, it helped to have a lot of background in that. But yeah, you go in with the treatment, like this is, with questions prepared, for the interviews, you know, and then you go in just shooting. I mean, my approach to that was really just uh, shoot a lot, right? So, I mean,
It kind of sounded, what were you using GoPros? Because it sounds, you can hear that some of the camera is waterproof stuff. Like you hear the kind of muffled of the water, it sounds like on the case almost of the camera.
yes. Yeah, very much so. It was important to use the GoPros because of the action and the yelling
Yeah.
at each other. We had to. And so I had a fleet of GoPros that we put on different boats, and we'd have mounts for the stern over their shoulders, looking down to see the action. We'd have them looking back at the characters so that you could see what it truly feels like in those big, big rapids. So yeah, that was an important part of the filmmaking, was having those GoPros for sure, because they just give such a unique, wild angle that we couldn't get with our long cameras. We have these really, really nice cameras, with long lenses, but you're still a ways away. Where those GoPros put you
Yeah.
right in it, and in the experience. But you do have, I mean, really, I knew that there was like these major features that I thought I'd want to develop, in the point of the story. I mean, there's obvious conflict in this story, right? Um, there's the obvious when you're looking at it and you're preparing, you're like, well, Lonnie can't see and he's going to kayak the Grand Canyon. That, that right there is, you don't have to develop it anymore, right? Now it's mainly, that would be like the story of the action of what's going to happen through the Grand Canyon. Well, there's deeper stories than that. Like what makes each character tick? Where do they come from? What experiences do they have? What are they struggling with? Um, and I knew that I wanted to isolate each individual up one of these canyons, up these pretty canyons, and just focus in on them. And so we had some scenes of each character stopping in one of these natural areas and turning and facing the camera and looking right at the camera.
Mm,
That's they in a sense sort of break down that wall of filmmaking in that sense, and they look right at the camera to connect with you. Uh, and I love those shots because they're real strong. The way I see
yeah.
them, really strong
And
characters.
I'm sure there'll probably be some other blind people listening to this. There's not audio description, but it is worth listening to. There's some the things that are said, and especially the way Lonnie, I've always said that Lonnie's incredible at telling his story, and he's an incredible communicator, but I wasn't aware of Aaron or Russell's stories before that. And hearing all three of them speak through their different experiences, especially Russell and Aaron are both combat wounded. Lonnie was shot in the face on a hunting accident, and very, very different perspectives. And so cool that it's two wounded vets guiding a completely blind vet through this. I mean, this is world class water that people die doing every year. And these three came together and made it happen. And it's just the messaging behind it all, even without being able to hear the images, and even just being able to hear the water in the background of it all, is absolutely worth even just listening to. I thought it was neat. It was, I wish I could see, especially now knowing more about like the cuts of the video that are going on. I do wish I could see it because I'm sure it's so much more powerful. But even in, I research my guests before they come on so that I can have things that I can guide the conversations towards if needed. But I was looking up I Googled Long River Home Awards, and just festival after festival that you guys took this thing to kept popping up. In that, so what year did you guys shoot and produce the movie in?
2019.
Okay.
The trip was I think it was 2017 was the trip, if I remember correctly. And then they completed the film and got it and premiered it at the Banff Mountain Film Festival in 2019.
And do you submit for that? Is it other people saw what you guys were, or I guess you said that was the premiere. So yes, you guys definitely decided that that was the movie you were going to make. Is that right?
Yeah, we were aiming for the stars on this one. I mean, like I said, I was given a great opportunity, and I felt like it just was such an amazing story that, with just these characters and like their stories, right? I just wanted
Yeah.
to get it as far as I could, with that. So yeah, we aimed big for Banff is, I think, I think it is the largest in the world mountain outdoor film festival, specifically. So I think it has a reach of like 43 countries or something like that,
Oh my
so
gosh.
yeah, they have a traveling show, that they travel around and to all these countries and places in the world. So that was the obvious. And then of course I wanted to show it there, and then I would love to have got it on the traveling show, all of which we achieved, by the way. So that was a huge success in its own right there, just getting it out into a festival that will show it, to large amounts of people was a win.
Yeah. And so two questions here. Where were you housing it I mean, you just put it on YouTube, I think, within the past 2 weeks or so. Where was it living before that? Did they have rights to it or?
It's no, it's so after, yeah, so go back to the film festival. What we did is we put it out to the Banff World Tour, got into that, and then it traveled to all these countries before COVID took it out. And so COVID took it out and stopped the world tour. But I think we were going through Europe when it got derailed. We had just gone through all of Canada and US, and then it was getting through Europe, and then it got derailed. And it ended up, after that, I had to figure out what to do with it, right? Because of this thing, with all the lockdowns and everything. So we ended up eventually getting it into all these other festivals. So it ended up showing all these other festivals throughout I don't know how long, I forget the time frames of how long. And so just got it out there as much as I could. It was just entering in many, many festivals. After that, I put it out on Vimeo, and that's where it ended up living, is on my Vimeo channel, till recently. And I should have been putting it out on YouTube many years ago, honestly, and I just didn't. I hadn't been pouring much into YouTube in my own business. I was putting a lot of my stuff on Vimeo, and my YouTube it wasn't that strong of a presence on there. And honestly, I held off from showing it on there until recently. Now it's pouring into putting all my stuff on YouTube and having that as my main platform for showing off my, video work.
Is Vimeo a paid platform?
It is.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So what was the impetus for transitioning it to YouTube?
Just wanting to grow my presence on YouTube and the reach that YouTube offers. Honestly, I want to get this story back out there, and the YouTube has these really neat features called Premiere, YouTube Premieres. And I've done this with one of my films, The Flowing Air, and just loved it. I was able to build up, email all my contacts, share stuff on social media saying, hey, if you guys are available 6:30, PM on Friday night on this date, plug into YouTube and watch this. Let's all watch it together. And I just it felt like a good turnout for that film. And I loved it. So I'm like, I got to get this YouTube, or I got to get Long River Home over to that YouTube channel, as fast as I can and get that story out there. And I'm glad I did. Like as of now, I've got all these people that are connecting with the story that I didn't reach with my promoting of the film in my own circles and even in the festivals. Like it just is amazing, YouTube and the platform and how it can get this film in front of people that need to see it. Zach, I dropped the ball. Let's just say that. I should have put it on YouTube a long time ago and put more of my focus into YouTube, right? So I just screwed up, but it's out there now.
Is the Long River Home what kicked off you being able to go into this full time?
No, no, it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Um, it was such a great opportunity. I think I definitely have got some jobs for that, for more storytelling for nonprofits, more film production for them, various nonprofits, based off, they saw this film, and they're like, well, we want to hire you to tell our nonprofit story. So that really, yes, created a solid portfolio piece from the filmmaking perspective and did, allow me to get some jobs here and there. But I wouldn't say it completely allowed me to jump in. I mean, there's, it as you're building a company, as you're building especially like a video production, a film production company, like it's, you're constantly self-starting. You constantly need to have your sink your teeth into these various projects, and you're building all these different areas up at once. So the Long River Home was a great starting point for that, and it created some great connections, honestly. And honestly, now that I think about it, I did bump over to. I did have some contacts when I decided to go out full time and just focus on video production. Some of those contacts that did watch the Long River Home and be moved by it, that were nonprofits, hired me to make their film. So that was, yeah, I actually, a long-winded answer to say, yeah, quite possibly. You're correct. Yeah, it was the context that I made there from that experience allowed me to get into another film project that I worked for with the Red Side Foundation. So I just completed their film called Red Side.
Yeah, I think I actually the first time that I heard the Long River Home was at an event for another nonprofit for some sort of adaptive sports outfit that I was at, if I remember correctly. But
Oh, cool.
that's the perfect avenue for that to lead towards. I mean, it's obviously you've got a knack for this stuff. And did you end up winning awards for it, or am I misspeaking on that?
No, we did. Yeah. We won an audience award for a small short films festival. That I think was wonderful. Like for all these short films, and we won the audience award for that fest. That was the Walla Walla Movie Crush Festival.
What a name.
Um, yeah, yeah. We won the GI Best Film Made by a Veteran at the GI Film Festival in San Diego, which was pretty amazing to win that one. I think that was another big one. What else did we win? There was an Impact Award from a company or a film festival over Adventure Uncovered Film Festival in 2020. Yeah, best film made by military and veterans at the GI Film Festival in 2020.
That's
Best short
awesome.
feature. Oh, we won the best short feature for Maine Outdoor Film Festival in 2020. And a audience award for the Walla Walla Movie Crush. Yeah.
And you
20.
should look into, I can't remember the specific name of it, but the VA actually has some sort of competition. I think it's annual that they put on for all sorts of different creative efforts. And I would imagine there's probably one for filmmaking, but you should look into that too, because I'm sure it would
Really?
just kill at that thing. Yeah, I can look it up after we hop off of here and email it to you. But
Yeah, please
and
do.
yeah, so what's moving forward? What's I know you're working on a new project that you've hinted and alluded to me, but what's going on now with Big Cedar?
Yeah, I'd like to back up 1 second here, and I'm
Okay.
going to answer your question. I'm just looking back. I wanted to get this out there because this is important. And somebody just posted in the comments to the Long River home just today. I guess that's lost. Half the vision in my left eye to a tumor that grew quickly on the back of the eye globe. I am having a hell of a time adjusting to my new world. This just happened to pop up. What an inspiration for my new life. Thank you. Somebody wrote that today in the comment section of the Long River home on YouTube. And I think that sums it up.
It
You
totally
know,
does. And I I mean, I lost my sight in 2019. That's when I shot myself. So I saw it, a couple of years after the fact, but I distinctly remember when I woke up completely blind. I thought my life was over. And
wow.
finding adaptive sports was a huge part of that recovery process. I mean, I made the decision while I was in the hospital. Once they dropped it on me that I was going to be totally blind, there were salt and pepper shakers in the Marine Corps chow halls that said, at least in my chow hall on Camp Pendleton, that said made proudly by the blind and visually impaired on them. And when we were discussing my future, like my parents and I, they started throwing out jobs. All I said was, I'm not making fucking salt and pepper shakers. And there was that. Okay, like, yes, I want to not become a bump on a log, but chasing my independence in that. But my very first taste of real independence after I was blind was snowboarding at the end of that same year. And it was actually with Lonnie. I'd gotten connected with Lonnie while I was at blind rehab, and having that sense of normalcy when I had no normalcy really anywhere else in my life it really helped pull me out of the darkness there. And
Wow.
that person hearing Lonnie's story has to feel the exact same way, even though it's half of their vision in one eye or whatever they said. It's
Yeah.
just that it's a beacon, man. And people, it's that's not just for blind people. That can be for an amputee, especially, with Russell and Aaron on there, or just it's that message of, hey, if that dude can push on through that, like Lonnie has, and all of these other things that he's accomplished, that absolutely is a glimmer of hope for people. And that is
Yeah.
so powerful beyond what you can, that's not quantifiable, but now that that thing's out there for everyone to see, I guarantee you're going to be getting more messages like that from people, whether that be in the comments there, or in emails, or just it circulating on Reddit or wherever it winds up. And you
Well, I
should
want,
feel very proud of that.
well, I just want to turn it around to the guys, and I want to speak to Lonnie, Aaron, and Russell right now. If you guys ever hear this, thank you for sharing your story because it's still permeating out there in the online world. People are still moved by your story. And yeah, no, I mean, I bring stories to people through video production, right? But I'm behind the camera. I mean, on this one, I briefly put myself into into the film, but to get back to the point is like these guys and their story is what matters. This is what keeps me going for a filmmaker and wanting to tell stories is just the inspiration that we can get to learn to push through life. And even your story, like how like yeah, just how hard it is to to be able to push yourself down that mountain when you can't see, or to push yourself down a river when you can't see. Like I just admire, you know, that. And watching Lonnie was just something else. Watching him, we sort of joked. We were like, Lonnie, are you sure you can't? You're 100% blind.
He's on his blind guy skills. I tell this to everybody when I'm talking about Lonnie, are on a different level. It's it's cartoonish, and I'm sure actually being able to watch him while he's doing his blind guy things is ridiculous. But his awareness, his spatial awareness, and it's incredible. But what's next for you?
Well, let's see. I'm working on I won a Big Sky Film grant, which is a grant here in Montana for filmmakers. I won some money for that to tell a story about Mike Zadek, who's a Olympic level wrestler here. He that turned into a coach, a high level wrestling coach. But Mike's rebuilding his late father's used car dealership into a world class wrestling club in small town Augusta, Montana. And he's going to call it Benchmark Wrestling. You can check his site out at Benchmark Wrestling. I think it's .org. But he's doing some great things. He wants to do some great things for this wrestling club that's going to teach Montana's youth how to just life skills, as well as teach them how to wrestle and coach. But I feel like I use wrestling every day, and I wrestled years ago in high school, but that was it. But I still feel like what you learn in that sport, I'm taking with me building my business daily. Like you got to grind and
It's
you
the
got to
hardest
show up.
sport that I played sports year round growing up and played pretty much everything except for water sports. Wrestling is absolutely the hardest sport that I ever participated in, and is something I wish I would have started much younger. I only did it for junior and senior year of high
Oh,
school, but
good.
it really, the grit behind it, it is so grueling. Even with jujitsu, wrestling's harder than
Mm,
jujitsu. It is brutal, and it teaches you how to grind through things like you just said. just
yeah.
it the I really, if I ever have kids, that is absolutely something I will try and get them to get into as young children, because I think it builds so much character.
Yes.
And
Accountability.
yeah, well, and also when you lose, that's a big loss because it was all you, and it was one-on-one combat to some degree, and that's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, it's all around, it's incredible. But I think that is funny because I feel the same way with my wrestling experiences. I'm like, this absolutely helped kind of shape me, even though it was just 2 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it does. 2 years is plenty of time to be down in the trenches, right? Learning how to grind, learning that, when you lose, that feeling of pain and embarrassment, and I never forget how that felt when I lost, when I was in middle school or something younger. And of course I lost in high school, but when I was at those earlier stages of just how that felt when you lost, I hated it.
It's
And
uniquely painful in
oh,
terms of sports. Yeah.
when you get pinned, did you get pinned ever?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. That's part of wrestling. It's
but
at a
oh,
match with the spotlight on you. It is, yeah, and I don't, no one else cares about it as much as you do, obviously, but it'll rip you apart and inside a little bit. It does. It teaches you a lot and how to
oh,
handle things like that with dignity and some sort of grace, and accepting, okay, this is where I messed up. That is my fault, and here's how I can fix it. What am I going to do to better myself?
yes. And
Yeah.
saying I think everybody should get pinned in life in front of an audience because, oh my goodness, what you learn from that, you're just like, I will never go through that again. It's you literally hit that's what you sort of speak in your mind, but you go through this crossroads experience when you get stuck on a mat and cut the mat short because you got pinned, and you're at a crossroads. Okay, I go back to practice and I work harder to make sure that doesn't happen, or I'm fine with it. And I'll be getting pinned again. There's those two types of wrestlers. It's either you're going to make change or you're not. And I think that just carries over into life. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. This is another film that is a passion project that is dipping into my past experience growing up in Great Falls, Montana. Mike Zadek and Zadek's were from Great Falls, Montana. I used to go to their father, Bob Zadek's wrestling camp. I went once
Okay.
actually. I didn't go often, but I went once, and I remember how tough that was. And they bring the Iowa Hawkeye wrestlers in because they all wrestled for the Iowa Hawkeyes at the time. So
Yeah.
it's just as a young guy seeing these big stars in a sense in your sport come to your town and teach you was a life-changing experience. So this film, I'm excited. We're following a building project. So his father passed away. He took the steel beams to the building, and he's now resurrecting those steel beams into the wrestling club so that those steel beams could be a part of the wrestling club. And that represents his father. So I think we're going to really dive into a story about father and son and, accountability and learning, really it's, I think, a Montana legacy story. Really it is through this act of wrestling. And, I'm excited to dive in deeper on it.
That's really cool. And I love the symbolism there of him reusing some of the girders and things like that. That's neat. But I mean, timeline wise, I guess if it's a construction project that you're following, you don't know how long that's going to be.
I like to do things the hard way, I guess. But no, I mean, I am following this construction project because the building of it is, a story. So Mike, let's just tell you this quick story. When I was, um, I'd say 3-4 years before, prior to jumping into this story, I had written a pitch deck. I want to work on a Montana wrestling story, and I mentioned his addicts specifically, Bob and his brother Bill and Mike. And I didn't pitch him on it because nothing presented itself, and I wasn't in the spot to do it.
They have a lot of creative names in that family.
Yeah,
Bob,
right.
Bill, and Mike. Like, come on,
Well,
guys.
but Zadok is such a specific name,
Yeah.
like it's a, it just stands out, but they, anyway, I wrote that pitch deck and, didn't pitch him yet. And then fast forward 4 years, on Facebook, I saw that Mike had said, okay, I'm rebuilding my father's used car dealership and I'm repurposing steel beams into this building. At that point, I reached out to Mike and said, hey, and talked to him about, working on the film project with him. So yeah, it's following the construction project, but I can't think of any other, I mean, he's got a great story. I mean, he's been all over the world. He was on the level of the Olympics. I mean, yeah, he's got a rich story, but I wanted to tie it to Montana and what he's doing for Montana and talk about these wonderful family themes of the love of a father and what a father can teach you, and how his father helped shape these champion wrestlers. So there's all these rich themes there, but also I'm just partial to my home state of Montana and the lifestyle here, here and the character of people that are just gritty and they just grind. They're like, I'm going to dream big and go for it. It's very much how the West was built, and it's still here, my friend. It's still here. And this story will dive into how it would be like a modern day Western in some ways of how the West was built, because these ideas of building this camp, this structure up. So yes, we're following the building of it. He's raising funds for it currently, which is, so this could postpone the film out for ways, but it's good. I've been able to connect with Mike over it, and it's just wonderful following his story and seeing him, getting to know him and see how his story is developing. But if you want to learn more, you can go to my website. There's a benchmark tab under my documentary films on my website, so you can learn more about the film project.
And I'll put it in the show notes, but you want to tell people what it's called?
Yeah, the film is going to be called Benchmark.
Or your website?
Oh, the website is going to be, so you can go to bigcedarmedia.com. So cedar is just like the cedar tree, bigcedarmedia.com.
Awesome. What else? You got anything else you want to highlight before we wrap this bad boy up?
I don't, no, just a pleasure talking to you, Zach, getting to know your story and I'm excited to learn more about your story and just connect. And hopefully this is the first of many conversations.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming on. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind.